doing this in the morning. Today is just a full trading day for me. I've actually canceled 6 appointments. I need to just, sit down and just focus until about 7 p.m. And normally on a very big trading day like that, I get worn out mentally. So it's a good idea to do our podcast early this morning. I'm looking at the NASDAQ and it's flying like we're doing 14,800 this morning, just pre-London session. And I am worried, but I'll do videos around this stuff, later on the YouTube channel if you're a trader. Look, man, I'm happy that a lot of people caught that bottom that we spoke about, but I still think there's a big crash coming in the markets. You may not know when, but it's coming. It's coming. Right. Anyways, let's stay focused on the stuff that we are doing in the podcast. We are reading one chapter a day of a life-changing book. We are showing up every single time and we're maintaining the discipline, drawing the lessons and trying to be as applicable as we can as quickly as possible. Because in the science of getting rich, the other biggest problem is the ability to procrastinate, which suffocates a lot of our growth, right? So you must have a strong will to forge the way forward towards your goals. Strong will is attending all these things. Number one. Number two, strong will is actually applying the stuff. And number three, if you remember in the first book we did, strong will is also about sustaining and maintaining your faith levels as you go through the ups and downs, which I called the law of rhythms, the universal principle, right? So yesterday we looked at chapter 9. Yes, it's really to chapter 9. Oh, shake my hand, man. We're doing chapter 10, episode 22 of the podcast. Instead, we looked at chapter 9, and chapter 9 gave us some super cool practical approaches to deal with debt. Right, debt was introduced in chapter 8, the story of debt and the fact that all one needs is determination. That will bring it up again, where the determination is the way. If there's a determination, then a way can be found, right? And you really need to see it that way. You need to see yourself as a slave if you're in debt. You need to see yourself as not being a free human being until you finish your debt. And because you are a slave, you have no proximity to ownership of your life, of your financial assets, and of your future. So your focus, shake my hand. Good morning, sir. Good morning, buddy. Your focus should always be towards targeting your debt. And then yesterday's chapter, actually, we got a cool plan, right? So throughout the books that we've done, although the emphasis has always been about to start future prosperity, observe the 10% rule throughout every single, variation of the books we've done. In this particular chapter, last night's chapter, we added a few things. Well, first of all, divide your entire thing out of 100% your income, blah, blah, blah. 10% of what you get must go towards your future. You gotta start paying yourself for the future now, right? Through favorable, smart investments. The book spoke about going to people who know that stuff. Don't get caught up in quick get rich schemes. Don't get hung up in getting rich overnight. Build, right? So the theme here is build wealth. All right. And if you want free information around stuff like that, follow the 365 Trading Academy YouTube channel. If you want concrete information, take the course, right? But the point is, you got to start building wealth. Last night, then they start to build up the rest of how to split your income. 7/10 or 70% of your income should go to sustaining a life that you want to live. But that particular life, if you remember the other principles, has to be gear set in living within your means, gear set towards making sure that you are not reaching too high for where you are now so as to perpetually stay in debt. And the remaining 2/10 of your income, or 20% of your income, must be split evenly to target debt. I did add a caveat yesterday and I said, look, the way I did it, which was so much quicker and better and easier for me, was the smaller amounts of debts, things that in comparison to the debt that we had as a family here, the smaller ones, we just threw a lump sum of money towards those to quickly extinguish them with one big blow, and then moved on now to slowly start to slice that elephant, right? So that was chapter 9 in the clay tablets where you broke down this plan. So it's absolutely important. Chapter 10 today, the chapter is called The Luckiest Man in Babylon. And you remember this, we've kind of like already approached this topic of luck. In the earlier chapters, when Akkad was asked by, all the wise people of Babylon that the king had chosen who he was going to teach so that they could go teach people how to generate wealth, which 5,000 years ago made Babylon, the richest city in the world. Right. So luck was a big thing. How do we get the goddess of luck to approach us? Da 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 da. Those are kind of questions they were. And Arkad's thing in chapter 2 or 3 around the goddess of luck, it wasn't really so much about finding luck, but it was about being prepared for luck, right? So making sure that luck finds you ready, right? So the luckiest man in Babylon, at the head of his caravan, proudly rode Sharu-Nada, the merchant prince of Babylon. Sharu-Nada. He liked fine clothes and he wore rich and becoming robes. He liked fine animals and sat easily upon his spirited Arabian stallion. To look at him, one would hardly have guessed his advanced years. Certainly, they would not have suspected that he was inwardly troubled. The journey from Damascus is long and hardships of the desert many. Hardships of the desert are many. These he minded not. The Arab tribes were fierce and eager to loot rich caravans. These he feared not, for his many fleet mounted guards were a safe protection. But the youth at his side, whom he was bringing from Damascus, was he disturbed. This was Hardan Gula, the grandson of his partner of years, Arad Gula, to whom he felt he owed a debt of gratitude which could never be repaid. He would like to do something for his grandson, but the more he considered this, the more difficult it seemed because of the youth himself. Eyeing the young man's rings and earrings, he thought to himself, he thinks jewels are for men. Still, he has his father's strong face, but he as a grandfather wore no such gaudy robes. Yet I sought him to come, hoping I might help him get a start for himself and get away from the wreck his father has made of their inheritance. Hadangula broke in upon his thoughts. Why dost thou work so hard, riding always with thy caravan upon its long journeys? Dost thou never take time to enjoy life? Sharu-Nada smiled. To enjoy life, he repeated. What wouldst thou do to enjoy life if thou were Sharu-Nada? If I had wealth equal to thine, I would live like a prince. Never cross the hot desert would I ride. I would spend the shekels as fast as they came to my purse. I would wear the richest of robes and the rarest of jewels. That would be a life to my liking, a life worth living. Both men laughed. Thy grandfather wore no jewels. Sharu-Nada spoke before he thought. He continued jokingly, wouldst thou leave no time for work? Work was made for slaves, Hardan Gula responded. Sharu-Nada bit his lip, but made no reply, riding in silence until the trail ended them in the slope. Here he reined his mount and pointing to the green valley far away, see, there is the valley. Look far down, thou canst fairly see the walls of Babylon. The tower is the temple of Baal. In thy eyes are sharp, thou mayest even see the smoke from the eternal fire upon its crest. So that is Babylon. Always have I longed to see the wealthiest city in the world, Hardan Gula commented. Babylon, tomato, where my grandfather started his fortune, would he still alive, we would not be sorely pressed. Why wish a spirit to linger on earth beyond its allotted time? Thou and thy father can carry on his good work. Alas, of us neither has his gift. Father and myself know not his secret of attracting gold shekels, right? So basically, Hardan Gula is the son of this rich guy's friend. The rich guy is Sharu-Nada, all right? And Sharu-Nada is trying to teach this young guy how to create wealth as a favor to the young guy's grandfather. Now, the young guy's grandfather, obviously the grandfather was rich and was Sharu-Nada's friend, had a son, right, who's the young guy's father. The father and the young guy are pissing off the inheritance. They are bad with money. They are just ruining, what the grandfather did. And so this guy now feels like I owe that old man a good favor. And so maybe if I can teach this young guy a couple of things about wealth creation and riches, maybe, as a favor to the grandfather, I might make something out of him, right? So he says, look, man, at the end of the day, my father and myself know not the secret of attracting the gold shekels. Sharu-Nada did not reply, but gave rein to his mount and rode thoughtfully down the trail to the valley. Right. behind them followed the caravan in a cloud of reddish dust. Sometime later, they reached the king's highways and turned south through the irrigated farms. Three old men plowing a field caught Sharunada's attention. They seemed strangely familiar. How ridiculous. One does not pass a field after 40 years and find the same men plowing there. Yet something within him said they were the same men. So basically, he thought it was impossible to find the same people working on the same fields after 40 years. And we all know that's just pretty much life. Like, people can get stuck in the same terrible paying jobs their entire lives. I mean, I've seen people get trophies for 70, 60, 30, 40 years of service in a job that they hate, that paid very little, but because of this stuff here, right, the inability to think out of that box, they die in those boxes. Some people like it. I'm not talking about those people. I'm just talking about people who feel stuck and then maintain the status quo. All right, so don't come after me. I'm not talking about people who like where they are. If you like what you're doing, that is already successful. Good for you. That's my definition of success. It's not about money. It's about being fulfilled in your purpose in life, right? But he was shocked, right? He was basically shocked that there was no way this could be the same people working on the same field after 40 years, right? Yet something within him said they were the same. One with an uncertain grip held the plow. The other laboriously plowed it beside the oxen, ineffectually beating them with their barrel staves to keep them pulling. 40 years ago, he had envied these men. How gladly he would exchange places. But what a difference now. With pride, he looked back at his trading caravan, well-chosen camels and donkeys, loaded high with valuable goods from Damascus. All this was but one of his possessions. He pointed to the plower, saying, still plowing the same field where they were 40 years ago. They look at it, but why thinkest thou they are the same? I saw them there, Sharunada replied. Recollections are racing rapidly through his mind. Why would he not bury the past and live in the present? Then he saw, as in a picture, the smiling face of Arad Gula. The barrier between himself and the cynical youth beside him dissolved. But how could he help such a superior youth with his spendthrift ideas and bejeweled hands? Work he could offer in plenty to willing workers, but not for men who considered themselves too good for work. Yet he owed it to Arad Gula to do something, not a half-hearted attempt. He and Arad Gula had never done things that way. They were not that sort of men. A plan came almost in a flash. There were objections. He must consider his own family and his own standing. It would be cruel. It would hurt. Being a man of quick decisions, he wavered objections and decided to act. Napoleon Hill has this thing: wealthy men make decisions fast, successful people make decisions fast and change them slowly. And it's just that idea of short-circuiting that part of your brain that creates doubt and also procrastination, right? Some of you are sitting on incredible ideas from 2012. You're just waiting for the right time. Right? The time is now, guys. Wouldst thou be interested in hearing how thy worthy grandfather and myself joined in the partnership which proved so profitable? He questioned. Why not just tell me how thou madest the golden shekels? That is all I need to know, the young man purred. Sharunada ignored the reply and continued. We start with those men plowing. I was no older than thou. As the column of men in which I marched approached the good old Megiddo, the farmer scoffed, and the slip showed a way in which they plowed. Megiddo was chained next to me. Look at the lazy fellows, he protested. The plow holder makes no effort to plow deep, nor does the beaters keep the oxen in the furrow. How can they expect to raise a good crop with such poor plowing? Dost thou say Megiddo was chained to thee? Hadagula asked in surprise. Yes, he was chained with the bronze collars about our necks and the length of a heavy chain between us. Next to him was Zabado, the sheep thief. I had known him in Haron. At the end was a man called Pirate, because he told us not his name, which judged him as a sailor, as he had entwined serpents tattooed upon his chest in sailor fashion. The column was made up thus so that men could walk in fours. Thou wert chained as a slave? Hadangula asked incredulously. Did not thy grandfather tell thee I was once a slave? He often spoke of thee, but never hinted of this. He was a man thou callest trust and innermost secret. Thou too art a man I may trust, and am I not right? Sharon Nada looked him squarely in the eye. Thou mayest rely upon my silence, but I am amazed. Tell me, how didst thou come to be a slave? Sharon Nada shrugged his shoulders. Any man may find himself a slave. It was a gaming house and barely beer that brought me disaster. I was a victim of my brother's indiscretions. In a brawl, he killed his friend. I was bonded to the widow by my father, desperate to keep my brother from being prosecuted under law. That is crazy. The brother kills a friend. And so, like, if you guys see, if you watch, I don't know, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, basically those olden day type things. We call that feudalism. So when you're teaching people economic models, there's different models that society has gone through, and one of those is called feudalism, where the clergy, the Catholics rule the world, knights, kings, queens, right? So it's feudalism, and in feudalism, if you were a landlord back then, so let's say you owned land, right? So if you're a landlord, and you had people, serfs, they call them serfs, so not like slave, but serfdomship was a type of slavery, in my humble opinion. But if essentially your workers could till the land, work your land, right, and then stay on the land and then pay rent, right? So you give them a tiny part of your land where they could live and, feed themselves, so cultivate food to feed themselves. But even on that tiny piece of land, they would have to pay rent to you in labor and crops, right? Because you were the landlord, you own the entire field. But serfs were also bound to the landlord. So they were also like an asset. So if I was the landlord and I died, right, and then my son was next in line to inherit my land, my son would inherit my land and the serfs and the workers of the land. We're like passed on from asset to asset. And so my son could also own the servants' children, right? Because it was all property of the land eventually. So when he says here, that was 5,000 years ago, by the way, but capitalism hasn't changed much. We still have slave wage laborers. We've got Chinese making 14-year-olds, make Nike shoes, in Chinese factories, right? Nothing against Chinese. I'm just saying, slave ship, serfdomship are all part of this unjust economic system we have. So he says, look, my brother killed someone, and then because my brother killed someone, my father, desperate to keep my brother from being prosecuted under the law, so instead of my brother going to jail, he pretty much bound me, bounded to the widow by my father. So he gave Sharun Nada as a slave, to the widow. Right. So when my father could not raise the silver to free me, she in anger sold me to the slave dealer. So he literally was bounded as a serf and then became an actual slave. What a shame and an injustice, Hadan Gula protested. But tell me, how didst thou regain freedom? We shall come to that, but not yet. Let us continue my tale as we pass the plowers, the plowers jeered at us. One did doff his rage hat and bow low, calling out, "Welcome to Babylon, guest of the king. Here waits for thee on the city walls where the banquet is spread, mud bricks and onion soup." With that they laughed uproariously. Pirate flew into a rage and cursed them roundly. "What do these men mean by the king awaiting us on the walls?" I asked him. "To the city walls ye march to carry bricks, because you're a slave, until the back breaks. Maybe they beat thee to death before it breaks. They won't beat me. I will kill them." And then Megiddo spoke up. "It doesn't make sense to me to talk of masters beating willingly hard-working slaves to death. Masters like good slaves and treat them well. Who wants to work hard?" commented Sabado. "Those plowers are wise fellows. They are not breaking their backs, just letting on as if they be. Thou can't get ahead by shrinking," Megiddo protested. "If thou plow a hectare, that's a good day's work, and any master knows it. But when thou plow only half, that's shrinking. I don't shrink. I like to work, and I like to do good work for work is the best friend I have ever known. It has brought me all the good things I have had, my farm, my cows, my crops, my everything. Yea, and where be these things now? Scoffed Zabado, because they're now slaves. I figured it pays better to be smart and get without working. You watch, Zabado. If you were sold to the walls, he will be carrying the water back or some easy job, when thou who like to work will be breaking thy back carrying bricks. He laughed his silly laugh. Terror gripped me by the night. I could not sleep. I crowded close to the guard rope, and when the others slept, I attracted the attention of Gonzo, who was doing the first guard watch. He was one of those bright, those bridge and Arabs, that sort of rogue who, if he robbed thee of thy purse, would think he must also cut thy throat. Tell me, Godso, I whispered, when we get to Babylon, we will be sold to the walls. Why want to know? He questioned cautiously. Canst thou not understand? I pleaded. I am young. I want to live. I don't want to be worked or beaten to death on the walls. If there is any chance to get a good master, he whispered back. I tell something, thou good fellow, give Godso no trouble. Most times we go first to slave market. Listen now. When buyers come, tell them you good worker. Like to work hard for good master. Make them want to buy. You want to make them buy next day. You carry brick, mighty hard work, right? So that's just how the English is in the way it's written. After he walked away, I lay in the warm sand looking up at the stars and thinking about work. What Megiddo had said about it being his best friend made me wonder if it would be my best friend. Certainly, it would be if it helped me out of this. When Megiddo woke, I whispered my good news to him. It was our one ray of hope as we marched toward Babylon. Late in the afternoon, we approached the walls, and we could see the lines of men, like black ants, climbing up and down the step diagonal paths. As we drew closer, we were amazed at the thousands of men working, some were digging in the moth, others mixed the dirt into mud bricks. The greatest number were carrying the bricks in large baskets upon those step trails to the masons. Overseers cursed the laggards and cracked ballock whips over the backs of those who failed to keep in line. Poor, worn-out fellows were seen to stagger and fall beneath their heavy baskets upon unable to rise again. If the lash failed to bring them to their feet, they were pushed to the side on the paths and left written in agony. Soon they would be dragged down to join other craven bodies besides the roadway to await unsanctified graves. As I beheld the ghastly sight, I shuddered. So this was what awaited my father's son if he failed at the slave market. Godoso had been right. We were taken through. We were taken through the gates of the city to the slave prison. Next morning marched in to the pens in the markets. Here the rest of the men huddled in fear. Only the whips of our guard could keep them moving so the buyers could examine them. Megiddo and myself eagerly talked to every man who permitted us to address him. The slave dealer brought soldiers from the king's guard and shackled pirate and brutally beat him when he protested. As they led him away, I felt sorry for him. Megiddo felt that we should soon part. When no buyers were near, he talked to me earnestly to impress upon me how valuable work would be to me in the future. Some men hate it, they make it their enemy. Better treat it like a friend. Make thyself like it. Don't mind because it is hard. If thou thinkest about what a good house thou build, then who cares if the beams are heavy and it is far from the well to carry the water for the plaster? Promise me, boy, if thou get a master, work for him as hard as thou canst. If he does not appreciate all thou do, never mind. Remember, work well done does good the man who does it. It makes him a better man. He stopped as a burly farmer came to the enclosure and looked at us critically. Megiddo asked about his farm and crops, and soon convincing him that he would be a valuable man. After valuable man. After violent bargaining with the slave dealer, the farmer drew a fat purse from beneath his robe, and soon Megiddo followed his new master out of sight. A few other men were sold during this morning. At noon, Godoso confided to me that the dealer was disgusted and would not stay over another night, but would take all who remained at sundown to the king's buyer. I was becoming desperate when a fat, good-natured man walked up to the hall, inquired if there was a baker among us. I approached him, saying, "Why should a good baker like thyself seek another baker of inferior ways? Would it not be easier to teach a willing man like myself thy skilled ways? Look at me. I am young and strong, and I like to work. Give me a chance, and I'll do my best to earn gold and silver for thy purse." He was impressed with my willingness and began bargaining with the dealer, who had never noticed me since he had bought me, but now waxed eloquent on my abilities, good wealth, good health, and good disposition. I felt like a fat ox being sold to the butcher. At last, much to my joy, the deal was closed. I followed my new master away, thinking I was the luckiest man in Babylon. My new home was much to my liking. Nanadia, my master, taught me how to grind the barley in the stone bowl that stood in the courtyard, how to build the fire in the oven, and how to grind very fine the sesame flour for the honey cakes. I had a couch in the shade where his grain was stored. The old slave housekeeper Swati fed me well and was pleased by the way I helped her with the heavy tasks. Here was the chance I longed for to make myself available to my master, and I hoped to find a way to earn my freedom. I asked Nana Nadi to show me how to knead the bread and to bake. This he did, much pleased at my willingness. Later, when I could do this well, I asked him to show me how to make the honey cakes, and soon I was doing all the baking. My master was glad to be idle, but Saswati shook her head in disapproval. "No work to do is bad for any man," she declared. I felt it was time for me to think of a way in which I might start earning coins to buy my freedom. As the baking was finished at noon, I thought Nanadia would approve if I found profitable employment for the afternoons and might share my earnings with me. Then the thought came to me, why not bake more of the honey cakes and peddle them to hungry men upon the streets of the city? I presented my plan to Nanadi this way: if I can use my afternoons after baking is finished to earn thee for the coins, would it only fair for thee to share my earnings with me, that I might have money of my own to spend for the things which every man desires and needs? Fair enough, he admitted. When I told him of my plan, he peddled our honey cakes. He was well pleased. Here is what we will do, he suggested. Thou sellest them at 2 for a penny. Then half of the pennies will be mine to pay for the flour and the honey and the wood to bake them. For the rest I shall take half, and thou shalt keep half. I was much pleased by his generous offer, that I might keep for myself 1/4 of my sales. That night I worked late to make a tray upon which to display. Nadia gave me one of his worn robes that I might look well, and Soswati helped me patch it and wash it clean. The next day I baked an extra supply of honey cakes. They looked brown and tempting upon the tray as I went along the street, loudly calling my wires. At first, no one seemed interested, and I became discouraged. I kept on, and later in the afternoon, as men became hungry, the cakes began to sell, and soon my tray was empty. Nadia was well pleased with my success and gladly paid me my share. I was delighted to own 2 pennies. Megiddo had been right when he said a master appreciated good work from his slaves. That night I was excited so over my success I could hardly sleep, and I tried to figure out how much I could earn in a year and how many years would be required to buy my freedom. As I went forth with my tray of cakes every day, I soon found regular customers. One of these was none other than thy grandfather. Arad Gula. He was a rugged merchant and sold to the housewives from going from one end of the city to another, accompanied by a donkey loaded high with rugs and a black slave to tend it. He would buy 2 cakes for himself and 2 for his slave, always tearing and talking with me while they ate them. Thy grandfather had said something to me one day that I shall always remember. I like thy cakes, boy. By better still, I like the fine enterprise with which thou offerest them. Such spirit can carry thee far on the road to success. But how canst thou understand, hardened Gula, what such words of encouragement could mean to a slave boy, loathsome in a great city, struggling with all he had in him to find a way out of his humiliation? As the months went by, I continued to add pennies to my purse. I began to have a comforting weight upon my belt. Work was proving to be my best friend, just as Megiddo had said. I was happy, but Saswati was worried. Thy master, I fear, to have him spend so much time at the gaming houses, she protested. I was overjoyed one day to meet my friend Megiddo upon the street. He was lending 3 donkeys loaded with vegetables to the market. I am doing mighty well, he said. My master does appreciate my good work for now, and I am a foreman. You see, he does trust the marketing to me, and also he's sending for my family. Work is helping me to recover from my great trouble. Someday it will help me buy my freedom, and once more own my own farm for my own. Time went on, and Anadi became more and more anxious for me to return from selling. He would be waiting when I returned and would eagerly count and divide our money. He would also urge me to seek further markets and increase my sales. Often I went outside the city gates to solicit the overseers of the slaves building the walls. I hated to return to the disgraceful sites, but found the overseers liberal buyers. One day I was surprised to see Zabado waiting in line and filling his baskets with bricks. He was gaunt and burnt, and his back was covered with welts and sores from the whips. Right, so that's kind of like the friend who said he's not going to do much, he's just going to lazy around. So clearly he's not been working that hard, right? And his back was covered with welts and whips and sores. Now I'm sorry for him, and I handed him a cake with which he crushed into his mouth like a hungry animal. Seeing the greedy look in his eyes, I ran before he could grab my tray. Why dost thou work so hard? Arad Gula said to me one day. Almost the same question thou asked for me today. Dost thou remember? I told him what Megiddo had said about work and how it was proving to be my best friend. I showed him with pride my wallet and with pennies and explained how I was saving them to buy freedom. When thou art free, what wilt thou do? He inquired. Then I answered, I intend to become a merchant. At that he confided in me something I had never suspected. Thou knowest not that I also am a slave. I am in a partnership with my master. Stop, demanded Hardan Gula. I will not listen to lies defaming my grandfather. He was no slave. His eyes blazed in anger. Sharunada remained calm. I honor him for his rising above his misfortune and becoming the leading citizens of Damascus. Art thou his grandson cast of the same mold? Art thou man enough to face true facts, or dost thou prefer to live under false illusions? Hardan Gula straightened his saddle in a voice suppressed within deep emotion and replied, my grandfather was beloved by all. Countless were his good deeds. When famine came, did not his gold buy grain in Egypt, and did not his caravan bring to Damascus and distribute to the people so no one would starve? Now thou sayest he was but a despised slave in Babylon. Had he remained a slave in Babylon, he might well have been despised. But when through his own efforts he became great man in Damascus, the gods indeed condoned his misfortunes and honored him with respect. Sharunada replied. After telling me that he was a slave, Sharunada continued. He explained how anxious he had been to earn his freedom. Now that he had enough money to buy this, he was with this much disturbed as to what he would do. He was no longer making good sales and feared to leave the support of his master. I protested his decision. Cling no longer to thy master. Get once again feeling of being free man, of being a free man. Act like a free man and succeed like one. Decide what thou desirest to accomplish, and then work will aid thee to achieve it. So that desire and the formula is what you desire. You got to put the work in to achieve it. He went on his way saying he was glad I had shamed him for his cowardice. One day I went outside the gates again and was surprised to find a great crowd gathering there. When I asked the man for an explanation, he replied, "Hast thou not heard? An escaped slave who murdered one of the king's guard has been brought to justice and will this day be flogged to death for his crime. Even the king himself is going to be there." So dense was the crowd about the flogging post, I feared to go near lest my tray of honey cakes be upset. Therefore, I climbed up the unfinished wall to see over the heads of the people. I was fortunate in having a view of Nebuchadnezzar himself. I don't know if you guys know about Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar is in the Bible. King Nebuchadnezzar, he's the one who tries to burn Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in a furnace of fire, right? So kind of like almost convince them to bow down to a specific god. If not, then they should burn, but then they don't burn because an angel shows up inside the fire with them, and they rotate and rotate and rotate in the furnace, and they don't burn, right? So it's back in those times, basically. So this is King Nebuchadnezzar. He saw King Nebuchadnezzar himself as he rode by his golden chariot. Never had I beheld such grandeur, such robes, hangings of cloth, and velvet. I could not see the flocking, though I could hear the shrieks of the poor slave. I wondered how one so noble as our handsome king could endure to see such suffering. Yet when I saw he was laughing and joking with his nobles, I knew he was cruel and understood why such inhuman acts were demanded for slave building the walls. After the slave was dead, his body was hung upon a pole by a rope attached to his leg so all might see. As the crowd began to thin, I went close, and on the hairy chest I saw tattooed two intertwined serpents. It was pirate. The next time I met Arad Gula, he was a changed man. Full of enthusiasm, he greeted me. "Behold, the slave thou knowest is now a free man. There was magic in thy words. Already my sales and my profits are increasing. My wife is overjoyed. She was a free woman, the niece of my master. She much desires that we move to a strange city where no man shall know I was once a slave." So this is the story of the grandfather, a slave. "Thus our children shall be above reproach for their father's misfortune. Work has become my best helper. It has enabled me to recapture my confidence and my skill to sell. I was overjoyed that I had been able, even in the small way, to repay him for the encouragement he had given me. One evening, Saswati came to me in a deep distress. "Thy master is in trouble. I fear for him. Some months ago, he lost much, and at the gaming tables, he pays not the farmer for his grain nor his money." So this is Sharud Nada's master now fallen into debt. Remember, this woman said it is not a good idea for a man to what? To not be working. So now this master got so used to having this good slave bake the stuff and make money, he's actually now in debt. "He pays not the farmer for his grain nor his honey. He pays not the money lender. They are angry and threaten him. Why should we worry over his folly, his foolishness? We are not his keepers," I replied thoughtlessly. "Foolish youth, thou understand not to the moneylender didst he give thy title to secure a loan. Under the law, he can claim thee and sell thee. I know not what to do. He is a good master. Why, oh why should such trouble come upon him?" Not were Saswati's fears groundless. While I was doing the baking next morning, the money lender returned with the man he called Sassy. This man looked me over and said I would do. So basically, because the master owes money, he can just cancel his debts through the slave. The slave being Sharud Nadi, who's been working so hard to buy back his freedom, right? So that's kind of like extremely awkward, right? So now Siswati, so this guy comes now, the money lender, and with a slave inspector, and basically says, yeah, this is a good slave. The money lender waited not for my master to return, but told Siswati to tell him he had taken me. With only the robe on my back and the purse of pennies hanging safely from my belt, I was hurried away from the unfinished baking. I was whirled away from my dearest hopes as the hurricane snatches the tree from the forest and casts into the surging sea. Again, a gaming house and a belly beer had caused me disaster. Sasasi was a blunt, gruff man, and as he led me across the city, I told him of the good work I'd been doing for Nanadi and said I hope to do good work for him. His reply offered no encouragement. I like not this work, my master likes it not. The king has told him to send me to build a section of the Grand Canal. Master tells Sasasi to buy more slaves, work hard, and finish quick. Bah! How can any man finish a big job quick? Picture a desert with no tree, just low shrubs and sun burning with fury. The water in the barrels becomes so hot we would scarcely drink it. Then picture rows of men going down into the deep excavation and larging heavy baskets of dirt upon soft dusting trails from daylight until dark. Picture food served in open throws from which we helped ourselves like swine. We had no tents, no straw for beds. That was the situation which I found myself. I buried my wallet in a marked spot, wondering if I could ever dig it up again. At first, I worked with goodwill, but as the months dragged, I felt my spirit breaking. Then the heat fever took hold of my weary body. I lost my appetite and could scarcely eat meat and vegetables. At night, I would toss into unhappy wakefulness. In my misery, I wondered if Zabado had not the best plan to shrink and keep his back from being broken in work. Then I recalled my last night of him and knew his plan was not good. I thought of Pirate with his bitterness and wondered if I might as well just fight and kill. The memory of his bleeding body reminded me that his plan was also useless. Then I remembered my last sight of Medigo. His hands were deeply, callous from the hard work, but his heart was light and there was happiness on his face. He was the best plan. Yet I was willing to work as Magido. He could not have worked harder than I. Why did not my work bring me happiness and success? Was it work that brought Medigo happiness, or was it happiness and success merely in the laps of the gods? Was I to work the rest of my life without gaining my desires, without happiness or success? All of these questions were jumbled in my mind. I had not an answer. Indeed, I was sorely confused. Several days later, it seemed that I was at the end of my endurance and my questions still unanswered. Sasati sent for me. A messenger had come from my master to take me back to Babylon. I dug up my precious wallet, wrapped myself in tattered remnants of my robe, and was on my way. As we rode, the same thoughts of a hurricane whirling me hither, thither, kept racing through my feverish brain. I seemed to be living the weird words of a chant from my native town of Haran. Besetting a man like a whirlwind, driving him like a storm, whose course no one can follow, whose destiny no one can foretell. Was I destined ever thus punished for I knew not what? What new miseries and disappointments awaited me? When we rode to the country yard of my master's house, imagine my surprise when I saw Arad Gula awaiting me. He held me down and hugged me like a long-lost brother. As we went our way, I would have followed him as a slave should follow his master, but he would not permit it. He put his arm about me, saying, I hunted everywhere for thee. Where I had almost given up hope, I did meet Soswati, who told me of the money lender who directed me to thy noble owner. A hard bargain he did drive and made me pay an outrageous price, but thou art worth it. The philosophy and thy enterprise had been my inspiration for this new success. Megiddo's philosophy, not mine, I interrupted. Megiddo and thine, thanks to thee both, we are going to Damascus, and I need thee, my partner. See, he exclaimed, in one moment thou wilt be a free man. So saying, he drew from beneath his robe a clay tablet carrying my title. Right, so it's basically free now. He's bought him, right, out of his slavery. This raised above his head and hurled it to break it in 100 pieces upon the cobblestones. With glee, he stampled upon the fragments until they were but dust. Tears of gratitude filled my eyes. I knew I was the luckiest man in Babylon. Work thou see by this, and in time of my greatest distress, this proved to be my best friend. My willingness to work enabled me to escape. Keep pushing, guys. Keep pushing. We're almost done with the chapter, but the whole point here is keep pushing. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Work thou see by this time in my greatest distress, this proved to be my best friend. My willingness to work enabled me to escape from being sold to join the slave gangs upon the walls. It also impressed thy grandfather to select me for his partner. Then Hadan Gula, the grandson, questioned, was work my grandfather's secret to golden shekels? It was the only key he had when I first knew him. Sharon Nada replied, thy grandfather enjoyed working. The gods appreciated his efforts and rewarded him liberally. I begin to see. Hadan Gula was speaking thoughtfully. Work attracted his many friends who admired his industry and the success it brought. Work brought to him honors he enjoyed much in Damascus. Work brought to him all those things I have approved, and I thought work was fit only for slave. Life is rich with many pleasures for men to enjoy. Sharon Nada commented, each has its place. I am glad that work is not reserved for slaves. Were that the case, I would be deprived of my greatest pleasure. Many things do I enjoy, but nothing takes the place of work. Sharon Nada and Hadan Gula rode in the shadows of the towering walls with the massive bronze gates of Babylon. At their approach, the gate guards jumped to attention, respectfully saluted, honored the citizens. With head held high, Sharon Nada led the long caravan through the gates and up the streets of the city. I have always hoped to be a man like my grandfather, Hadan Gula confided in him. Never before did I realize just what kind of a man he was. This thou hast shown me, that I understand. I do admire him all the more and feel more determined to be like him. I fear I can never repay thee for giving me the true keys to success. From this day forth, I shall use this key. I shall start humbly as he started, which benefits my true station far better than jewels and robes. And saying, Hadan Gula pulled the jewel bubbles from his ears and the rings off his fingers. Then reining his horse, he dropped back and rode with deep respect behind the leader of the caravan. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you tomorrow for the very last chapter of this book. The thesis, the idea, the driving point of today's chapter was work hard. Whatever you're doing, work hard. And the science of getting rich, it literally emphasized where you are right now. Right, not later in life. Start to grow. You will know it's time to move when you've outgrown the space that you're in. Put in the work. 365. Shake my hand. Thank you.